Well, hey guys, welcome to Chapter One's mini lecture. Uh, so, mini lectures, they're kind of weird. They're not going to be full lectures, obviously by the name, because usually I'd have you in class for almost 3 hours, and I'm not going to do that. In future chapters, I will have several videos in each chapter to aid you. But in these mini lectures, I'm going to give overviews of the chapters, big picture stuff. For instance, I'm not going to dive deep on the math. I'm going to do big picture information. When you want the math, you'll then go to the subsequent videos later in that week's playlist. Okay, there's kind of the structure. Now for today's mini lecture, chapter one's kind of easy. So I'm going to actually follow the publisher slides. I often won't do that. Okay. But chapter one just covers like a bunch of random topics, and there's no like consistent theme that I can just like ramble about. So with no further ado, let's get to it. So we're in the Goolsby book. This guy Levitt is one of the co-authors of the book Freakonomics, which is just like a bunch of like weird, quirky econ examples. It's a pretty fun book, actually. And so he had some influence on the way this book works. All right, so this is a micro class, as you know by its title, Intermediate Microeconomics. If you thought you were taking a macro class, I'm sorry, you're not. So we're going to be looking at the decisions of consumers and producers and the way they interact in markets. Individual choices, blah, blah, blah. So what is different between intermediate courses and principles courses? I'll tell you the main difference: math. Yup. Now, that's not the only difference. We're going to cover some topics that we just didn't get to in principles. We're going to think more deeply about things, but a lot of it, honestly, comes down to math. Now, I'm hoping that when I say math, you feel like this girl and you're like, yay! And you don't feel like whoever drew this. Okay? Because math is not meant to be scary. It's meant to be a tool. Now, how am I going to help you to make that be the case? Well, I started my YouTube channel because of this class, and we got all those videos to help you with the math. But ultimately, what's the point? Well, if you tell someone the price is going to go up, okay, fine. Let's say you're talking about a market for hamburgers, and you're like, oh, demand increased. The price is going to go up, yo. And so is the quantity. Well, I might be interested in not just knowing where the arrow is pointed, but if I'm running a business, I want to know how much should the price go up, and I want to know how much should I be selling. I want like a quantitative answer, you know what I mean? And so this intermediate class is a step towards being able to give answers like that. If we have a quantitative model, I can give you a quantitative answer. Now, most businesses don't have economists behind the scenes drawing graphs and labeling them with algebra and just solving the algebra all day. Okay, it's usually a lot more data driven, and that's sort of like the next step after this. This is the intermediate step. This is the halfway mark. This is the, hey, if you can make sense of this, then we got some pretty sick stuff to show you later, class. So we're going to go to deeper analysis. We're also going to have more policy focus, but I'll be honest, a lot of why this class feels different is because of the math. Yeah, we're going to build lots of models, like supply and demand is a model, for instance. These help explain what people are doing, and it gives us a way to predict it. So, for instance, in chapter 4, we're going to build a model of consumer behavior where they will choose between two goods and how much of each to buy. Now, if you want to look at individuals, you could look at thousands of different pieces of data for both of them. Like everything from their family background to their history with each kind of good to their income to everything else. And you can do that, but it's complicated. And it has a ton of data involved, and you can't make broad decisions for everybody based off of it. So what we're going to do in that chapter is we're going to make a model that simply accounts for the prices of both goods and the consumer's income and a model of the consumer's desires. And by a model, I mean it's going to be a math equation. And it's interesting because that sounds like really sterile and dumb and not very useful. But what's funny about it is that model actually does a really good job in a lot of situations. The results we're going to get from it are very useful. So we made this model to simplify a complicated reality, and yet we'll be able to make actual predictions based off of it. That's a useful thing. So that's why I do models. All models are wrong. Some are useful. I try to only teach useful ones in this class, but I'll tell you when they're useful and when they're not. Now, in our book, there's a few things to look for. There's application sections, which help you to see the theory see the theory happening in real life. There are Freakonomics essays, which I find quite enjoyable, just because they get on quirky topics, but they apply it to whatever your chapter is talking about. So both of those, I strongly recommend that you actually read them when you go through your book. Well, I know that it's super easy when you're reading through your textbook, when you see like the box that's like detached from the chapter, to just skip it. I was a student for a long time. I know that that's true for a lot of you. But those application ones and those Freakonomics ones will give you a more real world idea of when this stuff is like noticeable and useful. And so it's going to help you. I strongly recommend you get to those. Now, there's more than just those though. In addition to the application sections and the Freakonomics sections, there's also Figure It Outs, which help you by showing you step-by-step solutions to problems. There are actually problems at the end of each chapter, so you can test what you have learned. A lot of these problems have solutions in the back of the book, so you can check your work and check your answer. And there are make the grade boxes, which are hints and explanations and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So these are like laced throughout the chapters in your whole book. Strongly recommend you actually give them attention. And you're like, yeah, if you're looking for extra study material, these are a big deal. Okay, let's talk about the book now. Main topics: consumer and producer decisions. So that's chapter 4 and 5 for consumer theory and 6 and 7 for producer. In the interest of time, we're only doing 4 and 6. We're doing one chapter on our consumers, one chapter on, we're doing 7 also. Never mind. So we're doing 4, skip 5, 6, 7. We're also doing markets. So chapters 2 and 3 are supply and demand stuff. So those are all happening. On the supply side, we're going to talk about chapter 8, which is how a competitive firm operates. Chapter 9 is how a monopoly operates. I'm probably going to make you do chapter 10. I'm not sure yet. I probably should have figured out before I recorded this lecture. Check your course schedule, but it doesn't really matter too much for today. You'll find out later. Yeah, oligopolies, that... we're definitely doing chapter 10. Chapter 11 is the one we might skip. This is one of my favorite chapters, actually, oligopoly. It's like all the stuff between perfect competition and monopoly, and it's fascinating. But I'm not sure. We'll see. There's a lot more strategy in there. We might skip it and just go right to the game theory. Let's see. We'll probably skip 13. There's a good chance we'll do chapter 14, which is on... we'll probably skip 14, actually. 16 and 17 we're definitely doing, though. These are two forms of market failure when information is not equally shared. It's big in insurance and big in labor markets. For instance, your business knows how much you're going to make, but you don't. Or they know if they're paying you more or less than your peers, but you don't. Or you know if you're actually working hard and they don't. Stuff like that. And then externalities we're actually going to do pretty early in the chapter. Chapter 17 is way out of order. It's after chapter 3. So there's kind of like some brief overviews of some of the stuff we're going to talk about. Let's see, I mentioned to you before already in the other video, Econ people, they get paid a lot. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Yeah, we get paid right in line with all the other business folk. And it also feeds into lots of different things. If you have a degree in economics, then some grad school options involve econ, of course, but also finance, law, actuarial science, any sort of data science or data analytics, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. People like econ because people have businesses and they need smart people to help their business. And let's see. All right, that's the end of this chapter. This is a pretty short mini video. A couple of things I want to say though. One, don't be afraid to look at the principles level stuff. Okay, I have my weekly playlists for this class. But if you go to the course schedule, you'll notice that there's also weekly playlists for the principles class. Now, they don't cover every topic we're going to cover, but they cover a lot of them. And honestly, a lot of what they do is very relevant to us. Okay, actually, I'm going to show you real quick. One more share, guys. One more share. All right. So here's our course schedule. Here's us. And here's them. And let's look at some of this stuff. Hey, they're doing supply and demand just like us. Price controls and price ceilings. We're going to do that too. We're going to do some things they won't. We're going to do taxes and subsidies also. So they don't have that, but whatever. The cost functions, we do that. Perfect competition and monopoly, we do that. So for all of those topics, you actually might benefit from going to their videos because they're going to have playlists for every chapter also. Think Like an Economist podcast is a great way to get the basics and get the intuition. As far as the math, I made a bunch of videos for you. There's also Khan Academy. And there's also lots and lots of other nerds on YouTube. Trust me. There's a lot of them. Careful of Wikipedia. Not because it's inaccurate. It's actually fantastic. But it's often way more advanced than what we're going to do. I used Wikipedia a lot in my PhD. And what we did in that was very different from what we're doing in here. So I don't recommend doing hardcore Wikipedia research. And maybe it's changed because you can always change it. But yeah, it gets pretty crazy sometimes. So I would stick with my videos and stuff that looks kind of like them. If you see people going off on huge calculus monsters or linear algebra, talking about vectors and matrices, and if you see like crazy proofs and real analysis, you're way out of our depth. We're not doing that stuff, okay? Just be aware. Other thoughts? Okay, we're done with this chapter. You still got a learning curve assignment to do. You still have an end of chapter. Wait, not for this one. Yeah, usually you will. You still have an end of chapter assignment to do though. And we have our discussion forums. If you have questions, you can ask them there. And if someone else has a question that you know the answer to, you can answer it. and I will give extra credit points to people who answer questions especially well. Kind of an incentive to stimulate group discussion in an asynchronous class, I guess. All right, that's all I got for this lecture, guys. Next week or next time, supply and demand. A lot of review and a lot of new. Peace out, guys.